secrets night. Maybe I can make it right. Sit down close to baby, we can talk about it. No need to be mad. Hate to see you say.
Hello everyone. So a few people asked me about a guide, and to be honest I was not sure how to approach this, since there are already a lot of guides focusing on like detailed rotation, min-maxing, etc. for the Unholy class. So I thought maybe I will just, I don't know, freestyle it. In the back there's my Halls of Infusion dungeon running, which I was doing yesterday. So I guess I will do some explaining, talk about why I do things the way I do them, maintenance buffs, rotation, and yeah, maybe you learn something, maybe you have fun. When the War Within launches, I will definitely make some more specific, say, guides for DK on how to behave in certain dungeons, like dev CDs, utility, mob control, how to help your tank, set up specific pulls, how to help your healer, yeah, your healer. Yeah, you could already hear I'm actually German. Maybe my accent already gave it away. If it's too annoying for you, I hope you can just mute it and enjoy the video. Otherwise, have fun. So, timer starting. We are going in. The first pull, usually a larger one, tank goes through, and here you can already see the first thing you can do is a DK, because this is the tank I play a lot with, and you can see he knows that I'm the one to control this specific apparatus, or apparatus, whatever it's called. It's a dangerous one, and usually the one that wipes the DPS players coming from behind while the tank goes forward. In general, you should always wait until the tank secures full, like has all the groups together, has the aggro. DPS player who dies from aggro is in over 90%. It's his own fault, at least in my opinion. When everything is clumped together, we go into the damage rotation. So usually things that are very important are, you have the 3 maintenance buffs, which is your Plague, of course, your Defiles, so your Scourge Strike cleaves, and your Plague Bringer. So at least every 10 seconds we need a Scourge Strike to maintain our Plague Bringer buff, since our diseases are actually the things dealing the most damage at the end. Yeah, you can see big pull in the beginning, Bloodlust, all the CDs. In general, as an Unholy, woo, that's a bad one, but there you can see what I mean. Luckily, Unholy extremely tanky. Right, in the talents we have something that is called Will of the Necropolis, which I always take as a DPS player, because it just makes you so tanky. In general, survivability is the most important aspect in M+. This is the first thing, because, yeah, and again, same shit. When you're dead, you deal 0 damage. Meaning, there were fights where the healer died and I had to be standing there with a tank, and I was dumping all of my runic power in Deathstrikes just to stay alive. But guess what? My Will was doing some damage at least. So even if it was just 100k DPS single target, we killed the boss because I stayed alive. And this is also the reason why in most of my keys, you can see here on my channel, I'm on top of the DPS board. Of course I only upload these, otherwise where's the clickbait, right? But people usually die because they prioritize, I don't know, damage, CDs, repositioning over survivability. And this is the first thing you have to learn when you want to run at least some higher keys, like I would say 12 and above, where the mechanics, the skills, the mobs are really punishing, is you always have to stay alive. Which as a DK is not very hard actually, because we have a lot of OP dev CDs and we have our Deathstrike. Deathstrike is something that is not only for the tank. Because when you make a mistake, when you get a big hit, just press that Deathstrike. Like, maybe it's your mistake, so you will be punished by this anyway with some minor DPS loss, but again, when you die, you deal no damage. Also, your dev CDs, oh, I don't know who put that actually, just use that shit. If you don't know the exact situations where to use it, so where to get the maximum value out of it, just use it on CD. You can even put it in a macro if you want, like using it sub-optimally is better than never using it at all. These are some very important things
Dispel.
I have to tell people, especially when they're new in the game, when you're not running these high keys, and yeah. See, the early groups and hordes of infusions can be quite dangerous, but with a DH tank and enough kicks, it's not a problem. Okay, so let's talk a bit about rotation. The first 3 GCDs you always want to do in a group is get your buffs running. Meaning, you want to have your Plague on there, which is applied by your Dark Transformation with the Unholy Blight talent anyway. You want to set a Scourge Strike to get your Plague Bringer running, so that your diseases deal 100% more damage. And you want to put down your Defile. It also deals a lot of damage, but of course for the Scourge Strike, cleave. Then your CDs, honestly, it doesn't really matter, just pop them down every time you have your CDs. You have 45 second CDs, you have 1.5 minute CDs, so basically when you just use everything on cooldown, it naturally aligns. The only thing that is a bit more complicated regarding the opener is something that is even optional, and that is your Vial Contagion. So the skill that actually spreads your diseases from your target to the other targets. Meaning, you want to have at least 4, best would be 6 runes on that target before you use Vial Contagion, and of course spread it to the other targets. Meaning, in your opener, after you use, of course, your Plague, your Scourge Strike for Plague Bringer, and your Defile,
Dispel.
you go in there, you put a Festering Strike, you use Unholy Assault, you have 6 runes then, you press Vial Contagion, and then you go for the Apocalypse. This way you are spreading 6 runes to all other targets. If you're new to DK, and maybe you're just picking the class up again, you don't have to do that. You could just skill Pestilence, which is a passive talent instead of the active Vial Contagion, meaning it removes 2 buttons from your opener, and you can just start with your maintenance buff, throw down all your CDs, and then continue with your normal AoE rotation, which basically consists about dumping runic power with Epidemic, generating runic power with Scourge Strike. All of this in the maintenance, I don't know, like frame of having your Defile down, having your Plague up, and having your Plague Bringer running. These are the 3 most important things. When you go in Dragon to the training dummies, and you do just that, these 3 maintenance things on the dummies, you do at least 200 to 300k DPS just without pressing anything else. It's so important. These are your most important DPS skills. You can already see this is very interesting in this boss. The weak aura is off because of the shortened debuff duration on DK. Oh, that was actually a nice grab from the pizza Pepe. Can't stay mad there, even though he sometimes gave the PI, I think by accident, to the healer. No clue why. Okay, what do we have here? Yeah, you can see overall damage 1.2 mil, pretty solid. Of course, the first section of the dungeon is the dungeon with the big pulls, where you can go for a lot of damage overall. Next pack here, pretty dangerous. Always have to be interrupted, otherwise they just zap through the group. You can also see the opener again, putting 6 wounds on the main targets, after applying the 3 maintenance buffs, basically then spreading them to the other targets, and start cleaving. I mean, this pull would have been a bit nicer if the tank would have set it up altogether, right? This was a little bit of, yeah, he pulled at the top, he is slowed down, then as a DPS player you think like, okay, he wants to play them separately, I use my cities now. Then he decides, okay, maybe I will take them down. I mean, it's also not a problem, right? Don't be the guy that just messes with the tank corrodes tank routes, routes, etc. Like just let the tank pull, use all your stuff on cooldown and M+, especially in pugging, because you never know how it's going and you don't want to waste any CDs, but don't start pulling on yourself because... Okay, what the fuck? Yeah, that idiot was up there. Getting killed by the Invis guys. They're actually pretty stupid. I hate them as a DK. Because when you go there and you throw down your D&D, like as a tank, with a DK, and they are someplace else and you just don't see them, and then they come out of stealth and they just immediately stun them. I mean, of course you can get out of there with your big Death CD, but yeah, still so annoying. Again, the same, starting with the maintenance buffs, building 6 runes on the target, spreading these runes, Apocalypse, and then going for the AoE rotation. Some nice thing here is a decay. Your AMS is actually such a broken skill, because AMS can literally trivialize boss fights for you as a DK. The real value is not to negate the magic damage that you receive, but to block the debuffs that come with the skill, with the damage. For example, here, when I use my AMS, I can block the toxin from these procs being applied, which of course is not that important here. But for example, in the Dungeon Neltaros, the last one I uploaded, you can see, and that actually is a pretty big thing, the boss where you have to run through him with the chains. When you use your AMS before the chains pop, you don't get the debuff. And the Death CD, like the CD of your AMS actually fits perfectly with this phase. Meaning you can play the whole boss fight without ever getting one of these chain debuffs. You get the chain, of course, but you don't get the debuff. And the debuff on Hierarchy's Tyrannical is insane. So it helps your healer a lot when you just block it and don't receive the damage. Doesn't matter if you block some damage with your AMS, debuff. The same goes, for example, for the Magmatas in the same dungeon. When he storms, everyone gets this big ticking debuff. You pre-AMS it, you don't get the debuff. Also Neltaros, the last boss. Before you pick up the item, when you use your AMS, you don't get the curse. Or is it a curse? Is it a magic debuff? It doesn't matter. So much stuff you can block. Last boss in Brackenhide, the weird witch with the totem. When the totem goes off, everyone gets this nasty debuff, which also reduces your damage, the damage you deal, like this red skull. Guess what? You can use AMS when the totem comes, or at least when it's close to casting that stuff, and you don't get the debuff. You can in theory even run through this big green cloudy stuff with your AMS up. Also the dragon, the upcoming dragon, the debuff in the group, which can be of course also dispelled or like retreated by I think a hunter or a demon hunter, etc. You can just pre-AMS it and you don't even receive it. So keep that in mind. Maybe I will make an own video in when the WoW11 launches for all the dungeons on which stuff you can actually block with AMS, like completely negate this mechanic. These were just a few examples, right? There's much more. I mean, basically, as a tank also, the first boss in Brackenhide, these 3 weird wolf or whatever thingies, when the totem comes, you usually get stunned as a tank, right? Not as a DK. You can just put your AMS, and as long as your AMS is up, the debuff is not applied to you. So when the totem dies before that, you don't even need a dispel. You're not in this weird vegetative state. Yeah, makes the fight much safer because you can position yourself between the arrow and the DPS getting charged. The frog. What is special here? I mean, yeah, you can again use your AMS to block the magic damage. You can do AMS to block the debuffs. In general, important to always move with the tank. The tank should move You should group for the frogs. The tank should move the big frog away. Then the frogs move behind you. At some point the big frog will cast the eat. And then just eats all the frogs. I cannot stand it when DPS, I mean of course I'm also a DPS pusher, so I'm usually also in the frogs there applying my diseases, etc. Especially there you can see me like, nah, I want some plague on it. When the DPS is standing in there getting all these stacks and getting the damage, right? Just move with the tank. Also an advice you can take for basically every dungeon. Also when you get aggro, always move with the tank. Because otherwise you won't lose the aggro. You saw me just grabbing some stuff. That's also a thing as a DK. You can really help your group, right? Look left and right. Usually I take care of the healer. So for example when there's a spiteful week, or even when they are like in Brackenhide, the mobs that just go wild and focus you. How was he standing in there? You can just grab these things. Another thing you can block with AMS are the debuffs applied by the affixes actually. Incorporeal, afflicted, etc. We can also talk a bit more about damage rotation, because for AoE I've said some things, for single target not. Some things changed going from Dragonflight into War Within, because your Death Coil, your Sudden Doom Death Coil procs now consume wounds, or one wound to be precise. Meaning, in Dragonflight you always wanted to have your wounds basically reduced to 0, right? You build them up, you use them. Otherwise you would have like a strength buff stored on the mob you could already have, right? But now, since the Sudden Doom Death Coil procs also consume wounds, you want to have between 2 and 4 runes on your target, like on the boss at all time, so you don't lose damage when you get a Sudden Doom Death Coil proc, right? That's the thing that changed, so don't use all of your runes single target. Always have at least 2 up there. This was a weird bloodlust, I don't know. Used all of the stuff before that, but again, apply the plague, put the defile down, use Scourge Strike and Epidemic. Then when the cities are ready, Dark Transformation, use it. Then build the 6 wounds on your main target. Spread them with Wild Contagion and then use Apocalypse. And then just start blasting. Unholy deals so much damage now. On just a 45-second city. Watch the floor. Always prioritize survivability before damage. Use your Deathstrikes. As a DPS, DK, Unholy Frost, we are 100% self-sufficient in these dungeons. You don't need a healer. If at any point you blame it on the healer, it's always your own fault.
Dispel.
Another thing we could talk about is the legendary. I honestly hate that active. It's like, yes, it deals a lot of damage, but it just kills you so often. I don't understand why they changed this for the hunters, right? Why they changed it for the torch in the first raid, right? That you can move while it channels, even though you can stand on range, right? Like the legendary just throws you into this melee brawl, and then it's like, yeah, you just stand there now for 2.5, I don't know, depending on your haste, seconds, and just get deleted by whatever then, right? So in theory, yes, there is a right opener with the legendary, etc., but in M+, don't use it on pull. At least from my experience, because you either get aggro because you hit some big crit in the end with a burst, or, for example, the first pull in Academy, you go in there with a legendary, yeah, guess what? Green puddle under you, bam, you're dead. So that's why in a lot of keys you don't see me use the legendary on cooldown. I'm just very cautious there, because it happened to me so often. Yeah, see there already was a minor mistake in the rotation because I used my sudden, like my death coil proc without a rune on the boss. See there, I dropped low, I use a potion. Also a thing, you should always have a potion with you can use for these kinds of bosses where it's a big heal check. Otherwise, single target build runes, burst them with Deathstrike, and use your runic power for your death cards. 800k overall, pretty solid. But it's so good that we don't have these very long cooldowns, because with this you can actually mismanage it, right? When you use your army at the wrong time, maybe the next pull would be with Bloodlust, or maybe the next pull would be the bigger one, I don't know. It's so easy to mismanage. This version of the Unholy, it's so forgiving. Because our damage basically 45-second cooldown, and this is by experience every pack in M+, right? Usually takes, I don't know, 20-30 seconds to kill the smaller packs with some moving to the next one, etc. And so 45 seconds actually is perfect. And then 1.5 minutes Unholy Assault, the big abomination if you play it for every second one. The Abomination Limb is also a very interesting skill. 2-minute CD, I mean, it's not optimal, but on the other hand, it's not depending on anything, so you can just use it on CD, with some exceptions, of course, where the utility is needed, which would be here, for example, the last boss for the intermission, or very important for the last boss in the Noawh offensive. Right, because as a DK you can immediately group all of these mobs, just save your upper limb. Oh yeah, also funny good thing, as a DK you can help with these afflicted affixes, you can just death coil them. It costs a lot of runic power, but yeah, it works. And if this does not work, just use your AMS before they go off, and yeah, you don't get the debuff. But now I get the dragon debuff. But you can see I immediately used a Deathstrike. Why? Because I had the free proc. Otherwise, maybe in this situation I would not have done it, because I was not at low health. But in general, prioritize survivability and kicking stuff over your damage. This will help you time the keys much more reliably. Especially in higher keys, where the kicks are basically everything. That's the reason why the H-Tank was the most broken stuff ever for the last, I don't know, months, because of the mob control. You basically need nothing else. In a way, played the H-Tank with the silence saturates, etc. Again, every group 45 seconds to spike over 1 million DPS. It's not even that hard. Just get a UI you feel comfortable with, track these 3 buffs, like your Death and Decay or Defy Cleave, your Plague Bringer and your Plague on the mobs. And this is already most of your damage, and then just press all of your buttons on CD and you're actually good to go. I always have the feeling people think that Unholy was this super complicated class. I mean, at some point I guess it was, but they made it much more easy, to say it this way, trivial, due to the fact that there's the refresh now on all of your minions, so there was a time where it was actually important to use your DT last, I think, so that the buff applied by it also applies to all of your ghouls, right? Because it was basically, they had to be alive for this, or they did not. I don't actually remember the correct order there, but right now you cannot make a mistake there, just use all your stuff. Doesn't really matter in perfect order, as long as you start with your 3 maintenance buffs and then just throw everything in. And for the beginners, you don't have to play Vile Contagion. Just play the Pestilence rune that is next to it. It's a passive one, and it saves you the Scourge Strike, Unholy Assault, and then like going up to 6 wounds and then spreading it mechanic. Makes it even much more easier. Of course you will lose some burst, right? Because especially when the mobs die with all of these wounds, the wounds explode, which gives some extremely high burst. But yeah, that's not everything. First you have to learn the class, learn the skills, the defensive CDs, yeah. And then, oh, I was so confused there for a second. Because the DH tank was transformed as the healer. I was also doing this before the key, but I could just not bear the sight of this ugly Tauren. I had to go back to my extremely beautiful pirate transmog. Healer dying again. Oh, there I was really scared for a second. I did not expect him to be already at 60%. Then suddenly I was lifted in the air. I was so scared. That's why there was this camera flick. Oh yeah, this intermission, like depending on how these puddles and swirlies are spawning, it's disgusting for Unholy. Because we are basically with walking hindered, let's say. Whatever, we're just retarded, to be honest. This can be quite dangerous, the intermission, because when you don't kick them at the same time, they are kind of misaligned regarding their cast, which is not... Ooh, that was a close one. Yeah, I think this was my ice interrupt. I forgot the name now, but I actually don't really like this skill, because it's in the GCD rotation, so you cannot press it immediately. It's just an AoE interrupt, it's not even a stun, it has a long cooldown for that, it's just, it's not good. The kick from DK is pretty solid, because it's also ranged, like from a melee, a ranged kick, and you have all the grabs, like the death grips, which are actually pretty nice. For example, in Neltaros, most of the mobs, when they channel something that cannot be interrupted, which in principle would have needed a stun, you can just single-target grab, and basically cancel the skill with that. Where's the Bloodlust? Where's the Bloodlust? There we go. Yeah, I mean, basically, of course, it's nice to have all the skills aligned with Bloodlust, but it's not as restrictive now as it was before that with the army being a skill that should always come with Bloodlust. Like, two armies were basically worse than one with Bloodlust. Look at that, I talked for the whole key. What the fuck? Time flew by. Guess just for me, not for you, because you actually had to listen to me. Yeah, let me know if this was helpful at all in any way. Maybe entertaining. The talent tree, as you can see, there are some decent choices. In not tyrannical weeks, when I also trust my healer, I don't always skill the AMZ. Of course, in this dungeon you could do it in support on several occasions, right? It's basically troll not to do it actually in this dungeon. Maybe I just forgot. I mean, you can also skill the Soul Reaper instead of the Wraith Walker, and then the Lich Born as a death CD. I don't know. I mean, I'm still trying around at the moment. It feels like even for the 14 we made some huge damage and tankiness spike with the new talents. And also on the right side, of course, you can change the Vile Contagion to the Pestilence if you want to have it a little bit more relaxed and more passive. Here's the gear. At the moment I'm playing with one active and one passive trinket. I'm pretty much like the Ashes, even though the 2-minute is not perfectly aligning with our CDs. But of course you can play two passive ones. For example, the Chromatic Essence, which I usually use when I see more people in the group using it, because then of course it's better. And for the damage and the healing, you can see that our healing, a lot of it is passive. Of course, the Broodkeeper Ring, Insane, the Blood Plague by now, and Anti-Magic Shell, very good value. Actually have quite a bit of Leech as a decay, even though my gear is fully enchanted with speed, because otherwise I just don't like it. They want to be fast as fudge. And the damage, yeah, again, the plague is just the most important thing. And of course, afterwards the epidemic, which also needs your plague on the targets. Right? Then bursting wounds in the defile, and the defile itself also solid damage. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, you can tell me in the comments or drop a like or whatever. If not, thanks for listening anyway. Bye bye.